Hey Book Dragons, I am really glad you've joined me today. I recently finished reading Dr. Sleep by Stephen King, and I am here to talk about it. Now, the way we're going to do this is similar to other recent reviews that I have done. We're going to talk spoiler-free. We're going to talk a few spoilers at the end, and then we're going to talk about the movie, because I did watch the movie, and that's going to probably be mostly spoilers as well. So just keep that in mind. Also, if you have not seen or read The Shining, this could involve a little bit of spoilers for you on that as well, okay? So we're going to get right into the review, and here we go. Dr. Sleep is a direct sequel to The Shining. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that Stephen King has done a sequel. I was quite impressed with that. I'll just say right off the bat, you know when somebody goes out of their way to do something they don't normally do, that's going to either be a really good excursion or a not so good excursion. I had a feeling that with Stephen King it was probably going to be good. The Shining is one of my favorite Stephen King novels. It is currently ranked number 2 behind Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot is, or was, my favorite Stephen King novel that I've read. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But I read The Shining a couple of years ago during spooky season and absolutely loved The Shining. I thought it was a great novel, and then I watched the movie and the movie was garbage. That's all I'm going to say about that. We won't belabor that point, but yeah, the movie was garbage. I knew I wanted to read Dr. Sleep because I wanted to see the movie, because I really like Ewan McGregor, and so he was in it, and I knew it was a sequel to The Shining, so I'm like, oh, okay, well, that'd be great to watch the movie, but I have to read the book. So I decided that this year I would read the book. And I did this as a buddy read with Elaine over at Cobalt Dragon and Gareth over at Book Songs and Other Magic, and Jennifer, I'll put her channel down below if she has a channel. I can't remember how she's connected to the BookTube community, but I know she is, and she was part of the buddy read. So it's been a really great time. We've had some good discussions on some of the topics. I pretty much finished before everyone else did, but that's okay. That's kind of par for the course for me with buddy reads. I tend to finish ahead of my buddies, which I don't know how that sounds, but that is how it sometimes goes, unless we have a specific structure that we're following, like 2 chapters a day, and then we stop before we talk. So, you know, this was one of those more loosey-goosey buddy reads. But we've had some great discussions about it, and I think this was a very well done sequel to The Shining. So what's it about? This book is about Danny Torrance. Danny is all grown up now. If you have not read The Shining or seen the movie, you may or may not know who Danny Torrance is. But Danny is the little boy in the Shining movie who has the shine. He has the ability to see outside the normal bounds of the universe. That can involve reading minds. It can involve seeing spirits who have not passed on or are on a different plane. It can involve a lot of different kinds of psychic phenomena. So when you hear somebody talk about The Shining in the Stephen King universe, they are talking about a category that fits a wide range of psychic phenomenon. And Danny in The Shining, of course, was very powerful in The Shining. And we come to Dr. Sleep with Danny being all grown up. He has fallen into some of the same traps with addiction that his father had dealt with in The Shining. and he's trying to preserve what little life and sanity is left to him. And he ends up in this small town in New Hampshire and tries to piece his life back together, starts going to AA meetings, all that kind of thing. And he comes in contact with a young child who has the shine. And through various different circumstances, he ends up being very influential in this child's journey with the shine. And that involves not only helping her to understand her abilities and to hone them and fine-tune them, but also to protect her from a new evil that is seeking to feed off of her shine. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to have too many spoilers right off the bat. But let's just say that there are entities out there that grow in power by feeding on the psychic abilities of certain gifted individuals. And so Dr. Sleep is the journey of both adult Danny Torrance and this young girl that he ends up coming across that needs help and is just as powerful in the shine, maybe even more so than he was as a child. And let's just say Danny is still quite powerful. So that's all I'm going to say that is spoiler-free. I will say that I liked this book so much that it is now my favorite Stephen King book that I have read. That drops Salem's Lot to spot number 2 and The Shining to spot number 3. I still like The Shining. I still like Salem's Lot, but Dr. Sleep is now my favorite. This was such a well-written book and such a well-developed revisiting of the original source material. It's hard to continue a story. It's hard to have a good sequel, especially this many years later. And I was really impressed with how well Stephen King took us back to the Shining story and gave us a glimpse at what life would be like for an adult Danny Torrance who has had to learn to cope with the shine. And you have familiar characters that pop up, such as Dick Halloran, and you'll see a few flashbacks from time to time, and there are Easter eggs for people who have read The Shining. So just be aware when you're going into this. You will want to know what happened in The Shining before you read Dr. Sleep. There's just no way around that. Okay, so end of spoiler free. We're going to talk a few spoilers here. I will say, to start with, I was very happy to be back with Danny Torrance. I really liked him as a character in The Shining, and I really like him as an adult as well. And it was really interesting to see how hard he had tried to escape the traps that his father fell into, and yet, at some point, as he was growing up, he fell into the trap anyway. He got involved with alcohol, became an alcoholic, and he really did it to try and cope with the noise in his head and the people that he had boxed up in there, the dead people that he didn't want to deal with, but he had found a way to entrap them and to close them off and to quiet their power, thanks to Dick Halloran, who had taught him about how to use a box in your mind to contain those things so that they don't drive you absolutely batty. But at some point, it's hard to contain them without letting your power get out of control, and so he tries to dampen that down, and he uses alcohol to do it, and it's a really interesting case study. You know, he didn't want to become his father, but at the same time, he kind of did become his father. And it was very clear in the Shining novel that his father had the shine as well. Not to the same degree that Danny did. Danny was just an explosive case when it came to the Shining. But his father definitely had it. And so it's really interesting to see the way they both chose to cope with it. And in a sense, his father's demons followed him. And so I really enjoyed that glimpse into Danny's world and seeing where he was now as an adult and seeing the struggles he had and still having that same inner connection with people and seeing him finally realize that he needed help and needed friends and to meet the friends that came alongside him. It was just a really, really beautiful character study. Because you get to the end of The Shining and you're kind of like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to him from here. And we find a little bit of that out, and I really enjoyed a deeper glimpse into his character. I enjoyed a lot of the new information that we got about The Shining. The Shining is much more nuanced and expansive in Dr. Sleep than it is in The Shining. It's explored more. We're kind of exploring the boundaries of what The Shining can do, not the least of which is being able to ease the pain of others as they are passing. And I really love that Danny Torrance found his calling in the hospice as Dr. Sleep to help people transition to the next life by quieting their mind and speaking to them telepathically and helping them to go to sleep. And I loved his connection with Azzy, or Azrael the cat. And cats do always seem to have that inner sense of when people are in pain or they're dying or other things are going on. Maybe it's just emotional pain. Cats really seem to know what's going on there. And so I thought that was really neat to see the cat there. And then, of course, there's Abra. And Abra is quite the child. Just the fact that he first heard from her when she was a baby, of all things. Like, this is a child that is powerful in the Shine. And I love the way they learned to communicate through the chalkboard and eventually by email. And once they met in person, it was really interesting learning about the True Knot as well. Because at the beginning of the book, I kept thinking, I wonder if these creatures are akin to vampires in other parts of the Kingverse, like in the Dark Tower, and they've got different levels of vampires in the Dark Tower and Salem's Lot, and of course Salem's Lot and the Dark Tower are deeply connected. I won't go into it, but if you know, you know. As we got further in the story, of course, they're not the same. They're more energy vampires, although they do feed at times on blood, I guess, but mostly they're feeding on the essence of people, and especially people with the Shine. And so it was really captivating to see them. That was a truly unique villain. I'd never seen that kind of creature portrayed in anything else I've read before, or at least not portrayed that way. And I thought it was really fascinating to see how the True Knot came about, how long they'd been around, to see all the wealth and power that they had amassed, and how they've slowly been devouring people who have the Shine over decades, maybe centuries even. I really was quite impressed with that new villain that he brought into the story, but also with the way that he connected them to the Overlook Hotel, in a sense, and set their core headquarters, if you will, at the Overlook Lodge, which is right at the center of all the psychic activity that happened in The Shining. So I was really just eating all of it up. And I really loved the way the book ended. I thought the climax was perfect. The ending of Rose the Hat was just so good, so fulfilling. And seeing Danny go back to the place that he really had never wanted to go, but he was willing to go for Abra's sake because he knew if he didn't, she would be devoured, and he didn't want that to happen to her. So he had to go back to the scene of the crime, I guess you could say, but the scene of all his years of torture, and kind of confront his own personal demons to get there. I thought it was just fantastically done. I loved Abra's great-grandmother, her Momo. I really loved that connection there, and it was really interesting to me. And this is going to be a major spoiler if you haven't read the book. Major spoiler right here. But I've given you fair warning. Turns out that Abra had called Danny her uncle, probably not knowing that this was the case, but it turns out he's her actual uncle. And her mother was his half-sister. He only found that out later toward the end of the book, and I thought that was really, really neat. A cool way to kind of wrap everything together, and to see both of them heal and become stronger as a family, and to be part of each other's lives going forward. And I don't think we're going to get another sequel. I think this is probably the last one. But I really, really loved Dr. Sleep. I thought it was a brilliant novel. Absolutely a favorite of mine. My favorite Stephen King novel that I read so far. And it just reinforces again for me that his shorter novels are where it's at. His longer novels are just not my cup of tea. But he really packs a punch when he writes his shorter books. And I thought this was perfectly paced, and the story was really engrossing. I just ate it up, and I got to a certain point in the book where I just could not put it down. And so, yeah, I highly recommend Dr. Sleep to anyone who has read The Shining, and especially if you're a fan of Stephen King but you haven't read this one yet, I highly, highly recommend Dr. Sleep. So that's all I'm going to say on the book front. Now we're going to move to the movie, and this is going to be spoilers. I will say right off the bat, I did enjoy Dr. Sleep. I enjoyed it way more than The Shining movie. As I said before, The Shining movie was junk. I did not care for it at all. With one exception, I really liked Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance. I loved Jack Nicholson anyway, and he was really, really great in that movie. But yeah, the movie was just not great at all. Kubrick should have never gotten his hands on that book as far as the adaptation goes. But Mike Flanagan, who I will say is one of my favorite directors of all time. I'll watch anything Mike Flanagan does, and he is the perfect person to do Stephen King, I think. There were things in this movie that were changed. There were some big things that were changed. And I think they had to be changed because, they had to bring it in line with the movie and still keep the essence of the book, which I think Mike Flanagan was able to walk that line. I think he did a really good job of walking that line because there are just things that you couldn't get around. They had to get around the fact that Dick Hallorann was killed in the movie. And so how are we going to have Danny talking to Dick Hallorann in Dr. Sleep and still make it true to the Shining movie? And so, it worked out because Danny can see ghosts, right? So I think that was really well done. There were some major changes to family relationships. There were some characters that did not exist in the movie at all. Dr. John was in the movie, but he had a very, very diminished role. I really wish that they could have given him a bigger role because he had a huge role in the books, and he knows Abra personally in the books, and in the movie he really doesn't. He's more or less just the leader of the AA meetings, and that's about it. Danny had a different AA sponsor in the movie and everything. So certain characters were killed that were not killed in the book. I don't know why those choices were made, but they were. You know, we lost Billy Freeman. Abra's father was killed. Neither of those things happened in the book, so I'm not quite sure why that was done, but it is what it is. But there were some really, really good things. They got all of the major beats from the book about things that happened. The way they portrayed the feedings that the True Knot did on people with the shine was just really, really well done. And oh, it was really creepy. It was creepy in the book, don't get me wrong, but it was even more creepy in the movie. And I thought the actors they got to portray the True Knot were really great. They did a great job. I thought the final scene at the end of the movie, even though it was a completely different ending, I thought it was really well done. They still ended up in the same place. Rose the Hat ended up being destroyed, and I was just really sad that Danny Torrance died as well, because that didn't happen in the book. But he went down with the hotel, which in the original movie, the hotel was on fire at the end, but it didn't get destroyed. So it was still around. In the book, it got destroyed. So in the movie, it didn't. And so now you've got this leftover hotel that is still there, and Danny ends up going down with the hotel, and that was really poetic. I thought, I wish he was still alive because he is in the book, but what do you do? You know, overall, they really did a great job of capturing the essence of the story and the really personal moments that Danny had in the hospice center as he helped people transition to whatever happens beyond. And I thought it was just beautiful in so many respects. And the way he helped Abra and helped her hone her powers, and the way he and Abra worked together to destroy the True Knot, I thought it was fantastic. Really, really well done. They did keep to the spirit of the book, I think. So it was good. I would definitely watch it again. It is going to be one of those movies that is worth watching again, unlike The Shining. But so that's all I've got to say, I think, on the movie. If there are specific questions you have for me about my thoughts on the movie or the book, let me know in the comments below, and I would love to dialogue with you on that. Have you read Dr. Sleep? I hope you read The Shining, because I went into a lot of spoilers here. But if you haven't read The Shining, let me know that as well. I'd love to have a dialogue with you on details about the Shine itself and what those different powers look like and what you think some of the possibilities are, what some of the connections are that you saw to the Kingverse at large. There are so many ways that we could go with this video and so many rabbit holes that we could go down in the comments. Please do that with me. I would have so much fun chatting with you. And until next time, make sure you read more books. And if you want to watch more of my content, here's some ideas on the end screen.